Long before I became the Archbishop of Washington, I had heard about some of the wonderful things that DeMatha High School had accomplished. I had heard about your wonderful athletic program and the great and very successful coaches that have worked with DeMatha students and produced some world-class athletes. But it was only when I came to DeMatha for the first time for a Teachers Institute Day that I discovered another part of DeMatha, and that is your splendid music ministry. The voices of DeMatha are simply terrific, and that's pretty challenging for a boys' high school because guys don't sing all that often. And yet, this particular community has a splendid tradition of training young men in the fine arts, in music, and in other examples of human qualities and characteristics. You bring together a number of wonderful traditions that mark the history of DeMatha. I learned also that in your first year as a high school in 1946, there were 18 students, and they were all students who were thinking about being priests. So in a sense, your beginnings were that of a seminary. And I would certainly hope that while you have developed in many, many different ways, that some of you might even today think about becoming a priest. It would be another example of what DeMatha has done so successfully in its 75 years. It encourages young men to develop talents and gifts that fit conveniently within one family here at DeMatha. Ephesus was a port city in the world that St. Paul evangelized. And so it had all kinds of people who came to Ephesus either for commerce or trade, or some of them actually lived there. That's why when St. Paul wrote his letter to the Ephesians, he had to remind them that there were a variety of gifts that belonged to the community of faith in Ephesus. And that really is a tribute to DeMatha today, that many gifts are welcome. Many different backgrounds are welcome. You represent many different cultures. Some of you speak languages other than English. You speak one language, however, perfectly in your love for one another. St. Paul had to remind the Ephesians that all of the gifts that they had came from God. And so that's an important lesson that we all take this morning at Mass. Everything that we have, whether we are great athletes or great musicians or we engage in other forms of the arts, every gift we have comes from the one Father who fashioned all of us. Now, I know that there is great rivalry among the various high schools. Father James said we have 16 independent schools and 2 diocesan, and I know that there's great rivalry on the athletic fields. I won't get into which ones are stronger, but I do have a DeMatha alumnus who reminds me constantly that DeMatha is on top. And I listen to him sometimes. But I also want to remind you that as you look at the great heritage that is DeMatha, now 75 years old, you look back and say, all of these wonderful things that this school has accomplished in its past and hopefully will accomplish in its future, all of them come as gifts from the one God who desires nothing more than you be one family of faith. You are all brothers, one to the other. You all bring special gifts that make DeMatha the great school that it is. I see, and I didn't know about this, but I see that sign in the back of the gymnasium, One DeMatha. Remember that. That's the secret to your greatness and the promise of your future.